Good morning, Professor. I would have a question if possible.
Yeah, go ahead.
So our midterm scheduled for February 13th in the morning, which is also the exact same time that I have my stats 222 class exam. Would there be another time I could do our exam, or would I contact the Econ 222 one as well?
So how many students do you have in your other class?
I don't know. It's all pre-recorded classes until we go back in person.
All right. Because yeah, the thing is, this one has like hundreds and hundreds of students, so everything is just so set in stone. Yeah, if possible, I guess the changing the other would be a bit better.
Yeah, it's fine. I'll contact them, and then I can, if ever, I'll just get back to you next Tuesday.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, we can work something out, but yeah, it's changing this one in particular is just it's a big deal.
Okay.
All right. So let's continue our journey. Finish chapter 4 and hello everybody. All right, so that chapter was yeah, all of these notions are pretty fundamental to economics. So that one too, we're going to see a lot of important things today. All right, so this is so just to remind you what we were talking about. We were talking about we started about discussing elasticity, which is exactly the same idea, elasticity of supply as elasticity of demand. It's change in quantity, but quantity supplied in percentage or in proportion divided by change in the proportion of price. So and it's so that one is always positive since supply curves are always positive. And then this was the last slide discussing. So this, I guess if you learn this, that's enough, but I wanted to, so you can add much more rich information about why supply curves can be elastic or inelastic. They all have to do with production, because that's all firms care about is the sales price, which is the market. So it's not part of what shifts the demand or whatever. It's just determined by consumer demand. And all that's going to matter then for elasticity per se is what matters for production. So is it easy to change production value, volume, yeah, store, all these things. And of course, long run, short run, just like for consumers, it's easier to adapt yourself if you have more time. You can say, change the size of your car, for instance, if the gas price change. So that's the same for suppliers. So in the short run, it's very hard for them to change whatever they want to produce because they have lots of things to take into account. It's complicated to reorganize a whole production network and production chain, but in the long run, then it's much easier. And by the way, so this is so you're hearing a lot, I'm guessing, of talks about inflation. Well, so here's my 2 cents about it. So sometimes the issue is inflation. If you have some, I don't know, some central bank that's just but I can't really imagine a reason why. Yeah, in Brazil, probably you would have had a central bank that would just print too much money over time, or just But in most time, inflation is the end result of some other problem. So it's chronic government deficit is one. So then they will just print money. And in our case, currently, why do we have inflation? Well, we have inflation because there's big shifts in demand that forces firms to reorganize their production. And there's too much demand in certain sectors. So in these sectors, what happens is prices tend to rise. So yeah, that's the whole problem, is that we have, in the short run, we have many firms that are trying to reorganize their production. And it's just difficult to do that because you have so many people, say, for instance, some semiconductors. It's not that we can't produce more, we can, it's just we have to open up more. I think one of the biggest ones, especially for cars, is in Taiwan. And yeah, the thing is, all of a sudden they can't just double production. It takes time to plan these things. So the rise in prices is caused by a rise in the inability of firms to organize quickly their production. So same thing for that we had for demand. So here, how do we measure the elasticity of supply? We measure it with a shift in demand. So you might remember, for demand, we measure the elasticity of demand with a shift in supply. And then we could see how elastic demand is in the short run and in the long run. So here, that's the way to have an insight into the shape of the supply curve, is to observe what happens there when there's a shift of the demand curve. And like before, we have something that will happen in the short run, something that happens in the long run. So imagine that this is a semiconductor. And this is the price of semiconductor. I don't know if you write this way, but so what's happened? Well, now everybody's at home. People want 2 computers, or people don't, they want to equip themselves for Zoom. So they want a better computer or whatever. So then there's too much demand for semiconductors. So what happens? Well, the demand shifts to the right or up. So people are ready to pay more and they want more. But we're in the short run. So in the short run, there's the Taiwan firm, or there are some big firms in the world that can produce more semiconductor, but not all that much, because it's difficult to adjust production. So what happens? Well, prices go up. So is that inflation? Well, in that sector, kind of, you could say yes, because that's part of the whole basket of things that people may consume. But is that going to be transitory or permanent? Likely not so permanent. So it's just that you have to wait a bit for things to resume as they were before. So yeah, short run, you see a hike in price and not a big change in quantity, because there's just not so much to go wrong. And then if you give time for firms to adjust themselves, then in the long run, their supply curve is quite elastic, meaning they are able to just open up a new firm. So it's, yeah, semiconductors, well, I guess some minerals are maybe harder to find, and maybe it's not so easy, but for the most part, silicon, it's just, it's not that rare. So it's possible to adjust production. So in the long run, what are they going to do? They can expand their production, and then prices should start falling down. And what's more is, imagine if they do start producing a lot and they open new plants, but then the COVID pandemic sort of resolves itself. I know I'm optimistic, but imagine that's the case. And then it could mean that then if we're here and the supply goes back down, the demand goes back down, then they might start losing money for because they just opened too much production capacity and it's not needed anymore. Yeah, so it's tricky if you're an entrepreneur and you have to anticipate what's going to happen in the future. Yeah, so I could say short run prices go up a lot, quantity increases a little, long run prices go back down, and quantity increases a lot. So I'm saying it's semiconductor, but it really is the case in many different sectors. Yeah, so that's it for supply. Yeah, so be careful with labs. The 3 and 4 are due this Sunday. Yeah, that's so thanks for people to pointing that out.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
What I don't understand is why does the price go up as the quantity goes up for a supply curve? Doesn't the price of products go down as the production capacity increases?
Yes, so here the prices go back down, but initially, so there is sort of a bit of slack in production. So the existing firm can produce a bit more and go into overproduction, but not that much. So the increase in demand is going to materialize itself in especially an increase in price.
I see for the short term and long term, but my question is more like, why are the short term and long term slopes positive? Like I just don't understand how they can
The
be
supply curves?
Yeah, why are they positive?
Oh, it's supply curves are always positive. It's just if there's a higher price in the market, then more firms are going to start producing because it's more profitable. So that's it. That's just it. If the market price goes up, then more people are. Imagine that the market price for semiconductors go to $10,000, then even I am going to just stop teaching right now and go to work in the computer sector to make money.
So, yeah, I keep on forgetting that this is not for one company. This is for the entire market. Never mind.
Exactly.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right. Now, one other notion that's quite important, taxes. All right. So just as a question that I'm asking you. So imagine that we want to, we want to fight climate change at last. So we want to tax carbon, right? So is it better to tax the petroleum producing companies and tax them for the amount of the sales they make? Or is it better to tax consumers when they buy when we go and buy gas at the gas station after the fact? So who says it's how is it going to so is it going to matter? Is it in which case are the consumers better off? In which case are the producers better off?
Well, the first thing is like it's a it's an international market, and so it can involve exports and imports. So, for example, it could be in a specific economy, it could be a source of exports, and therefore, if you tax it at the source from the production, then you could reduce like basically reduce a productive activity that could bring you like, I don't know, give you more exports.
All right. Okay. So yeah,
I guess that's out of context a bit.
I'm going to restrict my so oil can be so, but think of any good that I can tax and think that it's just locally. So my question is, so if I say I'm going to tax some product, then is it more fair or less fair if I tax consumers after they bought it, or if I tax the firms proportional on the volume of their sales?
Isn't it the same for the company either way? Because either way, they're going to either charge more to cover the expense, or they're going to have the price automatically increased by the tax, and either way the customer pays the same amount.
Okay, so that was easy. So yeah, it's exactly, I couldn't have said better. I've said it better. So yes, that's the same, and this is what we're going to see here. So what's a tax? So here it's so it's an excise tax that's paid by consumers, but reduce the price received by producers. Yeah, it's not even that. Anyways, so if you look at the graph, this is a tax that's being paid by suppliers. How do you see that? Well, this is the market equilibrium, E0 before the tax, okay? So Q0 is the quantity, P0. Now what happens? Well, you tell the producers, okay, if you, for any amount you sell, you have to pay an extra amount of money per unit to us. And this extra amount of money is this right there. Okay. So for instance, if you sell E0, you, I don't want to yeah, okay, exactly. So it's this amount of money. Why? Because the suppliers know, if they have to sell, they know that they have to pay to the government this amount of money. Then what are going to tell the consumers? Okay, well, before I would have been perfectly happy to receive P0 in exchange for my good. But now I know that if I sell you this item, I have to pay this extra money to the government. So that means that I hike my price by this amount. So this change in the supply curve is the distance between the two curves is the amount that producers need to pay to the government after they sell. So what's going to happen? Well, so the consumers are not thrilled to pay that much money for that quantity. So then the market equilibrium is going to shift to E1. And so E1 is a higher price that consumers pay to the producers, but then the net payment that the producers do receive, you have to take into account the fact that they do pay the tax to the government. So in fine, what they do receive is this PS. So PS is what the producers receive. PC is what the consumer pay. And T here is how much is paid to the government in tax. All right. So this is what happened if the tax is paid by the producers. But now I'm just going to show you exactly what we just said. That so in that case, what happened is the producers shifted part of the tax on the consumers. And then what would be the situation if the tax was paid by the consumers? I'm going to just move that side and do the same thing. Yeah. But now let's just get rid of that line there, if I can. I'm going to make some artistic production there. So let's have something that's quite thick. Oh, and I have... Okay, so it's sort of disappeared. And then rather than tax the suppliers, I'm going to tax the consumers. So what happened if I tax the consumers, then as a consumer, I know that before, say, I was consuming E1 and paying this, but now I have to pay also this extra T to the government. So it means that what is the amount of money that I'm willing to pay to the company when I go and buy it? Well, this price PC minus this tax, because I know that I have to pay this tax to the government. So before I was willing to pay, say, $10. Now I know that I have a $5 amount to pay to the government. So at most, I'm going to want to pay to the company $5, and then I pay $5 to the government. So I pay the same as before. So then what happens to the supply curve, to the demand curve? So oops, it shifts this way. And yeah, in that case, there's no difference. And then the new equilibrium is displayed there. This is what the suppliers receive. And then what do the consumers pay? The consumer pay a high price, and they pay after paying, they pay this tax to the government. So conclusion, no difference in what? No difference in market equilibrium if tax paid by consumers or producers. So if paid by consumers, they shift part of the burden on producers by accepting to pay a lower price. And if paid by the producers, they shift part of the burden on consumers by charging more. Yeah, by paying less, by charging more. All right, so that's so this is, I know that taxes are a complicated topic. It's not a complicated topic, but the first time you see it, even the first time I saw it, I was a bit confused. So if you want to know what happens if you charge a tax, so you start with the market equilibrium. Here it's E0. And all you know is you're going to have this. So you have this distance between the original demand and the original supply. And this distance, this wedge, is the tax paid by the government. Yeah. And by the way, so just to see if someone really understand what's going on. So what is the total tax revenue of the government? Somebody sees that? T is the tax per unit. So it means if I buy a car, then I have to pay a $1,000 tax for $1,000 tax, for instance. But the total tax revenue for the government.
Times it with a quantity, V times the product of T and Q.
Yeah, Q0 or Q1?
Q1.
Yes. It is T multiplied by Q1. So you can see on the graph. So I'm just going to see to show it on that part, for instance. So it's this thing there. So that's here. And you see again that it's exactly the same quantity in both cases, right? So it's the same revenue for the government if they tax consumers or they tax. Now, in real life, does it matter if you tax one or the other? It matters a bit, in the sense that so people have done experiments on this, and it turns out that if you tax people after after they have consumed, and then you add in Canada or Quebec, you have the TVA and TPS. Anyways, you have the two value-added taxes. People tend to anticipate that they're going to have to pay that tax, but they don't completely take it into account. Whereas in many European countries, like in France, for instance, when you show the price to them, so on the menu, for instance, or in the store, you know the tax is already included. Then the just visually looking at the price, it's more expensive, so people are a bit more cautious and they don't buy as much. So that's been shown in the lab, so that when people can somehow anticipate that they're going to have to pay this extra tax, but not perfectly. Oh, that's the different story. Does this work on the new tax? I haven't heard that. Yeah. Anyways, I don't want to spend too long because we have to move on.
I have a question. So it's better.
Yeah. Go ahead.
When you don't show the total tax in the product when somebody's going to buy it, is what you say?
I didn't show what?
When the example that you give of Canada and France,
yeah,
that when someone is going to buy something and already saw the taxes included,
yeah,
that decreases the amount of buys that someone does of that product.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but of course, here it's human psychology. That's real life, and that's different from this. In this situation, this is a homo economicus, in the sense that we assume in this case that the consumer has a computer in his or her head, so they are perfectly able to anticipate. Okay, I know this is the price at the store, but I know that the tax is exactly T. So I know that I will exactly be ready to buy at most something that costs me PS rather than PC. So in real life, maybe they would accept to pay a bit more, and then they would be surprised, and then, oh, the real price is a bit higher. But so this is assuming that people can compute perfectly in their head.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so then question is, who actually bears the burden of the tax then? Here, it looks like both of them bear a bit of the burden. Why? Because the price used to be P0, and now what consumers actually pay is PC, which is higher than P0. So imagine that the gas price was, I don't know, $1, and then it's $1.50 that the consumers pay, but it's 85 cents that the producers receive. So in that case, the tax was introduced, and part of the burden has gone to the consumers, and part of the burden has gone to the suppliers. Now, what matters for this? In what circumstances do you think the suppliers pay more of the burden, and in what circumstances do you think consumers pay more of the burden?
I think it would depend on the price elasticity. So if
Go ahead.
Yeah, if the price is, so basically, like, if the demand is elastic, then the consumer will buy less of the product as the price goes up. But if it's inelastic, like for example, for the if you were to put a tax on like insulin, for example, like I don't know why the government would want to do that, but let's say they did, then they'll still buy the same amount of insulin, plus they'll pay the tax. So the total amount the consumer pays is much higher. The company still makes the same amount of money. But if it's some other product where the demand is more elastic, well, then the amount that is bought will be lessened, but at a higher price, but the company will end up making less money because less products are bought.
Yeah, that's an awesome answer. Perfect. So it depends on the elasticity of supply and elasticity of demand. And you asked, so if the government taxes insulin, so why would the government want to do that? Well, I will give you a reason why the government would want to do that. Look at what happened there. So before the tax, the quantity exchange on the market was Q0. But then after the tax, it decreased to Q1. So I can show. So there was a shift in the quantity exchange on the market. So that's bad, because that's all of these transactions there could have happened, but then they won't happen. Well, in the case of gas, you might say it's better because we reduce CO2 emissions. So that's a whole other story that we're going to see much later. But in general, we would say, yeah, here some people were happy to exchange, and now they cannot do anymore because they know that with the tax, it's too much. If it's insulin, then as you said, sick people are going to buy it no matter what. So then what you do is you have a very minimal effect on the market equilibrium. It's just that you make sick people pay more. So it's perfectly unethical to do that, but that's perfectly efficient from an economic point of view. I'm not saying that I recommend the government tax insulin, though, of course. Yeah, so as we just said, so the relative weight it's going to be distributed according to relative elasticities of supply and demand. So this is what, yes. So this is what happens if if demand is very inelastic. So that's the insulin market. I could just see it's example insulin. So here the consumers have no choice. So whatever they do, they're going to pay whatever price. So before the tax, the price was P0. And after the tax is introduced, well, so the suppliers, they don't care really. They could reduce their quantity. It's no big deal for them. But for the consumers, they have no choice but to buy it. So it's going to, the tax is going to be distributed here. And yeah, so you see that the price paid by consumers is going to increase a lot, and the price received by suppliers is going to be reduced by a very, very tiny amount. So here they say gasoline, but it could be like insulin market. I think that in terms of the gasoline market, it's the elasticity, at least in the short to medium term, is relatively the same for consumers and producers. So if it really were the gasoline market, it would look a bit more like the previous slide, like this. You would have both the consumers pay more, but the gas stations receive less. In general, I think that's the last time I looked at it. That's what happens. And then this would be something like what market I could think of. Here the supply is rather inelastic and the demand is rather elastic. So that would be I don't know what market exactly, but you see that that's the opposite. So in that case, you impose a tax. Consumers don't care about consuming less. They have other choices. They have substitutes, for instance. But producers, they are pretty much stuck with the quantity they are selling. Yeah, I could imagine that would be something like, say, electricity, if that's hydropower, because if you have a hydroelectric power plant, then how much do you produce? Well, it's a matter of rainfall. So maybe if people want to, so if there's a tax, you reduce a bit your output, but anyways, the water is going to flow in your dam, so you might as well produce electricity. But people have other means of receiving electricity. It might be from other, fruits may be it too. So if you can buy fruits from many places, but if I have my fruit tree in my backyard, well, if I don't sell my apples, I'm just going to throw them away. So that would be it too. And in that case, you see that the price received by the producers declined a lot, while the price paid by the consumers increased by a little. So and of course, if both are elastic, then the Q0 is going to reduce a lot. So Q1 is going to be much, much smaller than Q0. If both are inelastic, then Q1 is again going to be very close to Q0. Means on both sides, they have no choice but to. And so for the government, of course, the more inelastic the supply and the demand, the better it is to have a good tax revenue. All right, so we have until 10, right? Okay, that's good. Another super hugely important topic. So any question about taxes again? Anyway, so if you have one, so there's, oh yeah, go ahead.
How do I know to be 100% sure when it's like the consumer and the producer in the line?
Okay, so so here the original price is the original equilibrium, so it's E0 here. So the price was P0 and the quantity was Q0. Then what is the price paid by consumers? So what you have is to draw this is the distance between the original demand curve and the original supply curve. Now you introduce this tax there, this wedge between the two. And the price paid by the consumers is always, so the intersect with the demand curve. And the price received by in net by the suppliers is when this new line intersect the supply curve. So the consumers always pay more and the suppliers always pay less.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, so this chapter, there aren't that many slides, but all of them are introduce very, very important notions. Income elasticity of demand. So up to now, we have been talking about elasticity, about price elasticity, meaning when there's a shift in price, how each market participant is going to change their quantity supplied or quantity demanded. But there are other elasticities. So instead of, so if you go to the consumer side, so it's demand elasticity. So you can look at the percentage change in quantity demanded, not when there's a percentage change in sales price, but when there's a percentage change in income. So it means how much will somebody consume more or less in percentage when their income goes up or goes down, for instance. All right. And now you have to learn some vocabulary. So a normal good is when when you have an income elasticity that is positive, meaning if I have more money, I'm going to buy more of it. And when I buy less of it, then we see that the good is an inferior good. All right. So it's a good for which when my income goes up, then I buy less of that good, which can happen because if my income goes up, then maybe I'm going to give up cheap goods and start buying more luxury goods. All right. So this is the basic idea of it. So it's a classification. And by the way, so food, for instance, is a normal good. So I think the price elasticity it depends on your income, but it's usually around 1. So people with more income buy more food or spend more on food.
Could you have different examples of specific types of food that someone might buy less of the more money they make? And
I'm going there. All right. So characteristics of normal goods. So if income elasticity is positive but less than 1, we say that the demand is income inelastic. And so that these goods are necessities. So that they're the type of good that if my income doubles, I'm going to not quite double the quantity consumed. So yes, things that you need to buy anyways, but which you don't really enjoy all that much buying an extra amount. So something like I don't know.
Ground beef.
Beef. No, but beef is in some countries it's a luxury good. So I'm thinking something that you need, but you
toilet paper.
Yeah, toilet paper. Great example. So example, toilet paper. However, I have just wait a second. Even toilet paper, I have counter arguments. All right, I've seen this ad on the internet. So even toilet paper, if you're really filthy rich, it's possible that you you buy golden toilet paper. And I think the ad says it comes. Oh, I didn't have it, but the ad said it comes with a free bottle of champagne. So even toilet paper made of actual paper. So that's a necessity. What are luxury goods? So yeah, it's positive, and the elasticity is greater than 1. So you have like sports car.
Clothes.
The what?
Clothes.
Yeah, clothes. Yeah, there's you can always buy more clothes and buy yeah, you could say designer clothes. So yeah, we all have this in our mind the luxury that we would like to buy. Yeah. So, and of course, all of this is so it all depends on what your income is right now, right? So yeah, I'm giving you because even if you're super poor and you don't even have money to buy toilet paper, then you just use water and whatever other means. And then if you have your first job and now you have a bit of money, you say, okay, now for me, I'm going to start buying toilet paper. Well, going to from 0 to some amount is an elasticity greater than 1. So even in that case, for you, the toilet paper would be a luxury good. Yeah, so anything depends on your current status. All right, so inferior good, what are they? So so you were talking about what type of goods, so examples. You could say ramen noodles, craft dinner, self-service laundry, or what I like to call student goods. Yeah, so things that some of you may be using right now, but you're waiting for your first real job to have good money and stop buying ramen noodles and craft dinner. So they have a negative income elasticity because if your income increases, then you actually don't buy them anymore. Yeah, so yeah, so this I wouldn't bother too much about that point. Okay, so that's income elasticity. Yeah, any question about the income elasticity before I move on?
What does that mean, like, for the market as a whole?
Oh, it's imagine the country as a whole is getting richer, then toilet paper demand is still going to, but yeah, so it depends on which statistics this is, but at the individual level, then it's pretty easy to imagine that yes, if I make $100 a year in my household and it doubles, then I'm not going to buy double the amount of toilet paper. But yeah, for the market as a whole, yeah, I'm not too sure about this. So I would like them to supply some statistics to justify what they say. I take their word for it, I guess, but yeah.
Okay.
It's not a super important point, but yeah, so it's okay, yes. If it's there, so I cannot tell you, oh, it's never going to be at the exam. So it's whatever this says is the truth, and whatever I add as explanation is explanation. But yeah, for this class, this is what you. The thing is, I'm not the only person making the exam, so we make an exam for all the sections. So yeah, take this, whatever I say, take this as the truth.
Is that maybe a commentary on the fact that like an individual may have, like, let's say, like an individual could rise from poverty and become rich, but as a whole, statistically, there's always likely to be a certain percentage of the population that does not, like a high percentage of the population, and therefore that doesn't do that, and therefore those goods will always continue to be consumed by people that an individual would otherwise like stop consuming?
Yeah, so what you're saying is due to inequality. So that could be it. So just thinking about so that's the person who suggested the toilet paper is awesome. It's the exact thing I have in mind. It's the thing that once you have enough, there's just no reason to buy more. So imagine that, so Canada, for instance, was much poorer in the 70s than it is now, just because GDP per capita always increases. And then, so are we spending more on toilet paper than before? So my intuition is probably the share of toilet paper spending on our old spending has to decrease. Or another good example of inferior good, not inferior good, but yeah, necessities is lighting. And this is a very good example at the civilizational level too. So if you think back in the days, like, I don't know, in 1500, so people would just spend so much money on having a small wax candle that would be produced painstakingly by artisans. And then somebody discovered whale oil, which was so much better to produce lamps. And then petroleum oil, lamps that were better, and then electricity was invented, and then the cost of producing electricity went down, and then and now we have LEDs. So if you look at the importance of lighting, of spending on light in a country's budget. So it's I don't have the statistic right there, but if you look at this over time, so it may have been something like a big chunk too, and now it's zero essentially. We just don't think about it. It's something that's there, but nobody's going to think, oh, do I have enough budget to turn on my lamp tonight? No, nobody thinks that, but it used to be a big deal. So that's at the societal level. That's what it is to be a necessities. Is it disappears in the background. You just forget how hard it was to get it before. Yeah. So that's why that might be true. It's just I would like them to know to give us some statistics but yeah, probably. All right. So just that 2 slides left. So now you can, we can still start a bit the next chapter. Cross price elasticity. So this was change in price and demand or supply of the same product, but you could also imagine the combination change in the price of something else and the consumption of that good. And here they write it this way. So they use eta. So eta x y is greater than 0, then x and y are substitutes. Eta xy is smaller than 0, then x and y are complements. So when you're older, when you're more mature, you're going to learn that. So the real way of expressing this is if eta xy, oops, is greater than 0, we say X is a substitute of Y. And if eta Yx is greater than 0, then we say that Y is a substitute of X. And the same for this, for instance. But again, this is me telling you something a bit more accurate, but for this class, it's okay to learn this this way. So what does that mean? Well, I'm just going to give you an example. Do they have examples after that? Yeah, they don't really have an example. So take example. So coffee and sugar. If the price of, let's just say sugar increases. So do you think the quantity demanded of coffee will increase or decrease?
It stays the same.
Stay the same.
The status.
Okay, well, maybe that's not a good example then.
I
was,
black coffee.
so we usually consume together.
Unless you only drink black coffee.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
Or maybe there are persons that doesn't use like sugar. They use another.
Okay. So give me a better example then. Something that is usually consumed together, like yeah, okay, cars and
Cereal and milk, Professor.
oh yeah, that's a good one. So hot dog
Guys burnt.
and hot dog bread. All right. If the price of hot dog bread increases, the quantity demanded of hot dogs will go down or decrease. So why? Because they are complement. And example, coffee and tea, for instance. So this, I hope you don't always take your coffee with a cup of tea. So if the price of coffee increases, the quantity demanded of tea will increase because they are substitutes. All right, so this is how we measure it. So the percentage change in the quantity demanded of good Y divided by the percentage change in the price of good X divided by the percentage change in the price of good Y. The way to think about it is what would happen if it was exactly the same product. So if the price of coffee increases, or rather, if the price of hot dog increases, then the quantity demanded of hot dog will decrease. So it's the same thing for anything that you have to consume with the hot dog. So if the price of hot dog bread increases, then the quantity demanded of hot dog will also decrease. So if they go in opposite direction, then you know that it's things that you tend to consume together. So they are substitutes. So they are complements. But if they go in the same direction, meaning if the percentage in the price, if the price of tea increases, then you consume more coffee. then you know that it's because you're substituting one with the other. That makes sense. And then this is a rather more technical way of expressing this, because in that case, what you say is maybe the price of coffee increases and I consume more tea, but maybe the price of tea increases and I don't necessarily consume more coffee. So that would be a strange situation, but that could exist in some instances. But yeah, you shouldn't, do not worry too much about it. All right. So, yeah, so that's if X and Y are substitutes, then an increase in price of Y leads to an increase in demand of X, because people say, oh, now that the Y is too expensive, I'm going to try and find some alternative product that gives me the same. So I'm going to substitute. If X and Y are complement, then it means that when the price of Y increases, then you don't want to consume all that much X because you needed Y to consume it and be happy with it. So the demand curve shifts leftward, yeah. So now that's perfectly well expressed there. Questions about substitute and complements?
Oh, I thought of an example where some people might drink Coke, but if there's no Coke, they might drink Diet Coke. But if there's no Diet Coke, then there's still there. I mean, sorry, if they like I'm talking about your example of where like where someone might want to drink Coke, and then if there's no Coke, they'll drink Diet Coke. But I don't think it's the opposite. Not a lot of people that drink Diet Coke will not necessarily want to drink Coke if there's no Diet Coke.
Oh yeah, that's a good example. Yeah. So yeah, but so we don't. So economists don't spend too much energy classifying these in these categories. But I think it might be the first time I hear a good example of this. It really has to do with how you model economic behavior. For some sort of, we're going to see, like, we're going to describe the behavior of consumers with utility functions. And for some choices of utility functions, then you do observe that one is a complement of the other, but the other is not necessarily a complement of the first one. But it tends to be very technical. So that's why at this stage, you shouldn't worry too much about it. But yeah, the only thing I want to say is there's a difference between price of Y and quantity of X, or price of X and quantity of Y. There might be a difference. Right. But yeah, in most cases, it's probably the case that if one is complement of the other, then the other is complement of the first one too. But yeah, maybe Diet Coke and might be good. Okay, so now you're good for the lab that's coming. So let me just use my. Somebody has something to say? All right.
I missed 2 labs, right? I think maybe 1 is not. I don't think 2 will do. 2 a week, fuck. Only lose 1, no.
Sorry. All right. Is the other class interesting? As I can hear it. That. Wait.
Yo, Antonio, you want to shut off your mic, buddy?
Oh, yeah, I could do it. It's just I'm. All right, chapter 5. Sorry about that. Took me a while to find it. Here it is. Price control and market efficiency. So we can just say a few things about this. Yeah, so up to now we have seen a market equilibrium in which it's a situation in which both parties want to sell and buy the same quantity as the other. So for instance, if the market is in equilibrium, it means that there is no surplus production and no shortage, so no underproduction. This is not always the case. So it might not be the case because in the short run, the economy is in the process of adjusting itself. That's especially the case right now with respect to the pandemic and the supply of the world and all these things. But so we're going here, all the models we're seeing are static models in the sense that we don't have a real notion of time. Well, we had one when we looked at long-term and short-term supplies or demands. But we can still have notions of disequilibrium or shortage or excess production in a static model. If there is something that's always preventing the market from being in equilibrium. So that's, and it's going to be specifically government intervention in that case. Yeah, so what we were saying is that market transactions are voluntary, at least in Canada. Canada is a free country for the most part, I would say. So you cannot force anybody to buy what they don't want to buy or to produce if they don't want to produce that quantity. So it means that even if, for instance, the market price, so if there's some reason for that makes the market price being very, very low, then maybe there would be a huge amount of people who would like to buy stuff. But if the market price is too low and there's no producers who want to produce it, so they're just not going to produce it, and you're going to have a shortage. So that's what we say here in this equilibrium. The quantity exchange is determined by the lesser quantity demanded. So we say that the short side wins. All right. So this is this is a market that is in equilibrium. Why? Because demand intercepts supply, and there's at that point, which is feasible. So you have a quantity exchange, and for that price P0, then the quantity that people actually want to buy is exactly Q0, and the quantity that suppliers actually want to supply to the market is exactly Q0. So in that case, there's no disequilibrium. But here's what happens if you introduce a disequilibrium. So what would it be? Well, in that case, that would be a price ceiling. Oh, yes, still 5 minutes, but sorry, a price floor. So what's a price floor? So to remember you have to imagine that a price floor is, so you're saying, I want the price to be at the minimum some level. So what are you saying? You're saying if you don't introduce the price floor, you think the price would actually be too low, all right? So a price floor is a minimum price that is above equilibrium price. So yeah, it's a binding price and what does that lead? It leads to an excess supply. Why? Because you see that if the market equilibrium is E with the price P0 and quantity Q0, and for some reason the government says, I think this is too low, I'm going to ask everybody in the market to make transactions with a price that is at P1 or above. Then what happens? Well, you just look at the demand curve. For consumers, they say, oh, well, I was happy to buy Q0 at P0. Now, if the price is P1, then all these people there are going to say, well, for me, it's too expensive, so I don't want to buy anymore. So then the quantity that's actually going to be demanded by the consumers is Q1. It's a small quantity. Suppliers, though, they are going to be thrilled by having a price floor in principle, because for them, it means that they can sell to a higher price. But problem is now you have very few consumers. So producers would be willing to sell a huge quantity at that price. But it's a free country and you cannot force consumers to buy something that's too expensive for them. So then who wins? Consumers win. So the actual quantity exchange with the price floor would be Q1 here. And what is this? Here, the difference between the Q2 and Q1 is what we say is excess supply. That's what suppliers would like to supply, but cannot, minus what the consumers actually want to buy. All right. So do you have an idea of, in real life, of a price floor?
There's agricultural products in Canada that have price the prices are fixed basically.
Yes.
Like dairy, eggs, chicken. Does that count?
Sort of.
Yeah, not really, because it's literally fixed, I guess. So it's not a floor.
Yeah, their intent is exactly the same, and we're going to see this very shortly. That the impact is the same. So you have an excess supply. So well, actually, that's not the so the what they're doing is voluntarily restricting the quantity to make the price go up. But yeah, the what?
Gasoline.
No, there's no law that says that gasoline must be sold at a certain price. What there is gasoline taxes, which yields a higher price for consumers, but a lower price for producers. But I've seen it in the comments. So the best example is the minimum wage. So we introduce a minimum wage because what we're saying is it is forbidden for a worker to go to work, and so on the labor market. Yeah, on the labor market, consumer workers supply their their work effort, and firms demand work from workers. So this is it's contrary to everything you're going to hear in the news. Because in the news you say, yeah, so I'm going to demand work if I'm a worker and I want a job, I'm looking for one, and you think of firms as supplying jobs to people, but that's the opposite. Why? Because you just have to look at how is the money transferring hands. It's firms who buy the work of workers. So if the firms are the ones who pay for it, then it's the firms who are the consumers in that case. And work is just an input in the working process. And in that case, if we have a minimum wage, that's saying that there's a minimum price at which this transaction is allowed to happen. And so do you have an idea that what is the excess supply?
Unemployment?
Unemployment. Is here, if say we set the minimum wage to $25 an hour, then many people are going to say, oh, that's awesome. I'm going to look for work because I want to be paid $25 an hour. Are they going to find a job at $25 an hour? No, because some firms like, I don't know, McDonald's or Walmart, they're not ready to pay them $25 an hour. So there's an excess supply. There's an excess amount of workers who want to, oh, what, by the way, oh yeah, we're over time. So just to conclude this, no, not the only explanation. X of unemployment. So it's a very studied, very well studied topic. And the consensus among economists is that, yeah, if you have a bit of, if you have some minimum wage that's not too crazily high, then it does not really create all that much unemployment. But from a naive perspective, it's, if you look at this, you have to agree, if we set the minimum wage to $100 an hour, then there's going to be lots of people who want to work and not lots of firms who are willing to pay that high a wage. All right, so let's stop it right here. But yeah, I'm going to again be here if you have questions or comments. So,
Thank you. Have a nice
yeah, have a nice weekend.
Have a good day, sir.
Good day.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
Professor Lepage-Lassier, I have a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
The book is pretty unambiguous that price floors lead to an overall reduction in the well-being of a society. They state that in so many words at the end of the chapter. I'm wondering, indentured servitude in Canada was legal until 1948. Do we view, how do economists view that in terms of the well-being of society? I mean, it seems like even on this graph, they put the price of labor above zero, but we know from experience that the clearing price of labor is actually at zero.
So because some people are willing to work for free, basically.
Well, absolutely. They have for thousands of years. And in Canada, it was practiced until 1948. So we know from recent experience that, I mean, they had hundreds of thousands of indentured servants in Canada as recently as the 40s. So why is this, it seems like, is that just sort of an outlier case, or is that something that is actually like matters to economists.
All right. So what economists are going to say is whatever doesn't have to do with people in particular, it's hard to make a case for a price floor. So I have in old French books, the editions in the, I don't know what time they might have had them, in the 70s or so. If you open the cover, you see the price of this book is like back then they didn't have the euros, so it's like 10 francs. So it's like, oh, it's written in the book that this is the price that you must exchange in order to buy or sell this book. Does that make any sense? Well, it doesn't make any sense to dictate what the price of something else. So so there's a famous quote by Publius. I forgot his other name, so I'm just something. He's back in the antiquity. He said the price of an object. I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember the exact quote. Is whatever the buyer is ready to pay for it. So it means that if you say, oh, this book has to be at this price, then if the author becomes unpopular for whatever reason, then what do you have? You have many people who have heaps of books that they would like to sell, but they cannot sell them because nobody or few people are willing to buy them at this price. So it's really hard to make a case for a price floor or a price ceiling for general goods. Now for work or other things that have to do with human interaction or human dignity, then if you look at this very simplified version of reality, economists would say, yes, people are willing to pay to be paid $5 to pay for to work, and some firms are absolutely willing to hire them for $5. Who are we to tell them you are forbidden to do that? But so there are many things that may be going that may happen. So in terms of work, what we do observe is that, so okay, why do we have unemployment basically? So part of it that so if you study labor economics, what you see is that there is what we would call frictional unemployment. It's just the case that if for whatever reason I lose my job, then I don't have perfect information on how all the prices and all the firms everywhere, and they don't know about the fact that I just lost my job. So it might take a while for me just to go around, and so I'm perfectly employable. I could find a work at the wage that I would like to be paid, but it takes time to do that. And once I do that, once I do find a job with a firm, then both of us are are in what we would call a situation of sharing a rent, because we just found each other, and both of us would be very sad if we stopped the interaction, meaning if I went to work somewhere else, or if the firm found some other worker. And in that case, there is some bargaining going on. And how you orient this bargaining. So if there's our unions, for instance, then union can help increase the bargaining power of workers and raise their wage. And minimum wage can also increase bargaining. bargaining power of workers. So that is something that's totally beyond this simplistic model, for instance. Another reason would be, so what economists think tends to happen is if you set the price higher, then what this says to firms is you are not going to hire somebody who has very, very little skill at a very low wage. But what you can do is then say, I'm not going to pay exactly the same worker for a higher price, but I'm going to say I'm ready to hire a worker at $20 an hour, for instance, but a worker who has this skill. So what you're essentially creating with this is a force that drives people to get more educated and have better jobs in the future. So yeah, that's very complicated. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question a bit.
No, what I'm talking about is the textbook says that if you establish a price floor, these policies make society as a whole worse off. It says it several times in exactly those words, that price floors make society as a whole worse off. And it seems like they're obviously making a normative claim that that if we took that to its logical end, we would have to conclude that indentured servitude is a better situation than the price floor of a minimum wage, or the actual price floor of an abolishment of indentured servitude. It seems like they're speaking really imprecisely, and I'm wondering, is that, it seems like they're speaking completely outside of the realm of economics, and they're going into this whole normative area that am I mistaken in that, or is that common, or can you?
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. You shouldn't. Economics is a social science, so we are not. We're kind of good at describing simplistic economic interactions, but we're not in the right spot to make moral judgments, and we try to avoid it as much as possible. If you have a simple model in which you claim that this is a good representation of reality, in this model there is perfect information, no friction whatsoever, there is uniform, the goods that are exchanged are uniform, so in that case it is absolutely true that a price floor would decrease the surplus or the welfare of society. In real life, there is no perfect information. There is, workers are heterogeneous. There is bargaining that's going on. There's many workers. They just don't know what the value of their work is. So if somebody is, so that's what economists would say, or philosophers would say, is a paternalistic argument, but it still is the case that some people would just don't really know, have no clue what their workforce is, what the value of their workforce is. So if you just put them in some job and say, oh, by the way, I'm telling you, my friend, you be very happy to receive $2 an hour because nobody else in the world is going to pay you more than that. And that person believes you and have no outside information. Then, okay, that person is going to say, oh, I'm very happy to receive $2 an hour. But it's just, but it looks maybe like intentional servitude in the words that you would put. But that's just because that poor person has no idea how the job market works, and maybe so this is putting a lot of faith in the fact that people are perfectly informed, know their skills, know their value. I don't know if I'm being clear. So yeah, so the thing is, the book, you shouldn't. So you should say in this model, it's true, but in general, economics is a social science that simplifies reality. It's perfectly possible to make reality more complicated, such that there is room for a price floor, for instance.
That makes perfect sense. Thanks so much for your patience with that.
No, it's super interesting. Yeah. Another, just a comment I had too about preventing transactions is something like, oh, should I be allowed to sell my kidney? So here it's not a price floor on the kidney, or price of the kidney. It's just you're forbidden to sell body parts. But so what if, I don't know, I want to sell send my child to university and I'm ready to sell a kidney to pay for university, for instance. And then there's somebody who really needs a kidney. Shouldn't we allow people to make this kind of transaction? Or sex workers. So in some countries it's allowed, in some other countries it's disallowed. Again, you would say, yeah, there's a willing party who's willing to sell his or her body for money, and there's a willing party who's willing to pay for it. Who are we to say that it's wrong? Economists, you cannot say we have a perfect answer on that. It's complicated. There are many value judgments going on. So yeah.
Okay, and we're just dealing with simple models right now to get to the point where we can understand the more complicated stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So if you want to discuss something specific, then make a specific model about it, so you can incorporate more pertinent information. This is just the basic case for any sort of markets. Yeah.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Elizabeth, do you still have your question there? All right, I'm just reading it. Okay, so it's part, what you're saying is true, but it's part of the picture. So if I assume that it's okay to have a minimum wage, then yes, it has to track the price, the price and the wage level, for instance. Because if you set, so imagine that this is the price in the market equilibrium for a wage in 2022. But you say, yeah, I want I have set the price floor in the 1950s when the wages were 25 cents an hour. Then is that going to have any effect whatsoever? No, because people are going to still pay each other $5 an hour. And if you say, no, you're forbidden to pay lower than 25 cents, then yes. So that's what we would call a non-binding price floor. But it doesn't address the question, why should we have a price floor in the first place? Why not let the market decide it for ourselves? But if we do say that you need a price floor, then yes, you have to adjust it with the rising price levels. Is that clear? Yeah, good. Have a nice day.